Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'll just let everyone, just have a moment just to let everybody start joining, start watching. So this is an EPP group Instagram Live on social media, ahead of Social Media Day, which is tomorrow, the 30th of June. Nearly forgot the month we're in. So we are going to be joined by EPP Group MEP Vladimir Bilčík, who is Slovakian, and he is joining me right now, I believe.
Hi,
Hey, Vladimir, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I hope this works fine.
Yeah, we can see you, we can hear you. I really, really appreciate it. So, welcome to everybody. Just for the sort of rules of the game, if anybody wants to ask any questions, they can drop them into the chat for Vladimir. We're going to be talking about social media. We're going to be talking about its place in our lives, how we use it professionally, regulation, where the EU comes in, what the EPP group's doing. That's the point of this Instagram live. We'll go for maybe 25 minutes. So if you're joining and you're watching, feel free to pop some questions in. So Vladimir, where are you? How are you? What's going on?
I'm enjoying this evening in Brussels. I'm in my office. You can see glimpses of the European Parliament behind me. So I'm in the center of our workplace, and I'm doing well. Busy days ahead. We are just in front of our last session before the summer recess, which starts in Strasbourg next week. So just at work.
It's getting moving. So we are here on this on Instagram, a social media platform, obviously, but there are many. So, firstly, I mean, what is Social Media Day? What does it mean to you? Why are you interested in sort of this day where we're going to reflect on social media?
Well, it's the 30th of June, so it's tomorrow. We're doing just this session in the run up to the day, and it's the day to really remind ourselves of the importance of the social media in our lives, in politics, in social relations, in basically anything we do. I mean, it seems that the social media is now the place to be, and without it, we can't really move around. So it's really to underline how important it is.
How important is it for politicians like yourself? How much do you use it? How valid do you see it as a medium?
I think it's as important as telephone these days as computer. I mean, it's become a virtual necessity in the life of politicians, and it's crucial. I mean, it's something we all follow, we check, and it's part of our lives, and it's the place where politics happens these days.
What social media do you use most? Where do you find your, I don't know, best traction, I suppose? I mean, when you're trying to get your political messages out, what works best?
It's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's Twitter. I'm actually from Slovakia, and it's very curious that Twitter is the place where most of the MEPs are very active, but it's not very much followed back home. So it's a place which I use to communicate messages mostly in English. But in terms of my domestic audience and voters, it's Facebook and Instagram, and I'm open to any other suggestions. Of course, I do have two kids, and my teenage son is on YouTube all the time. So actually, I get all sorts of links, videos to watch. So I'm actually learning from my kids, and that's kind of fun too.
This is it. I mean, so I realized that because you joined so quickly, normally it takes the MEPs when we do this live a little bit longer. I didn't introduce myself to our viewers. So I'm Jack Parrock, and I'm a journalist based in Brussels, and that's relevant. I was reminded because for us journalists, our Twitter is our CV almost. It's the place where we share our work. It's the place where it's sort of a live CV, I sort of say. It's where everything sort of comes in, and where we sort of promote our work. We want to get our stories out, obviously. But there are some questions about social media, and there's certainly issues surrounding privacy, surrounding how it's used, bullying, hate speech, etc. From your point of view, what are the biggest challenges right now in social, regarding different platforms and regarding how they're regulated?
Wow, that's a huge question. But I think, the world in the social media has become so much a part of our lives that I think it's important to think of ways in which we can make it as safe, as pleasant, as healthy as the real life we live daily, as the offline space. I think this is one of the principles we're trying to inject into any kinds of rules when it comes to social media, to have it as well regulated and set up as the offline life. And I think this is a real challenge because the digital space is so new to our lives, and yet it's developing so fast. So if I can sum it up, I think this would be the one biggest thing. But in terms of the life of politics, I am very concerned about the kinds of walls that the social media in general build among people, about different groups of people. You know, we get into these bubbles and it's hard to break through these bubbles. And I think that's a real challenge when it comes to democracy, when it comes to having conversation with people who you disagree with, but you need to have a conversation with everybody because that's part of democracy. And that's where I also feel that we have a real problem because it's hard to have that conversation.
This is it. Echo chambers are, you know, one of the big problems for politics. Definitely, I've found myself in them, and you have to actually actively try to get out of them. You have to follow people that you might not like or you might not agree with, and resist the temptation as well to then fight or argue, not fight, but, you know, sort of join into conversations that create walls then, like you said, that actually don't forward the conversation. There's such great use in platforms that can be used. I mean, broadly, I'd say sort of social media. I remember I got my first Facebook account when I arrived on my first day of university in 2006, at the point where Facebook was only allowed for university students. What has changed in the last 10, 15 years since we all started really engaging with these platforms?
Well, you are an old-timer, really, because the first social platform I ever joined was in 2015. I was Twitter, and then shortly thereafter, Facebook and Instagram. And actually, you know, I'll tell you, quite frankly, had I not joined politics, had I not become a politician, I probably would be not as engaged, not as active on social platforms. I think it's also a generational thing, perhaps. So I'm a latecomer. But what has changed? Well, it's the fact that it's become such an important part of our lives. And actually, I see this especially with my kids. I mentioned my kids again, but you know, both of my kids are so hooked to the visual stuff on social platforms, social media, and we also communicate so much more visually and through sound bites, and I think this is it. Without it, you can really kind of understand the world and communication these days, and I think it's the fact that everybody is now on social platforms. So are my parents, you know, people in their 70s, and this is something which is really, I guess, the biggest change. It's a global thing, and tell me who is not on social platforms these days. Do you know anybody? I hardly do.
No, there are very few people. A couple of my friends actually did choose recently to leave it for the pressure and the stress and the issues and the concerns. And I think through the pandemic, dare I drop the P word or the C word of coronavirus, it's I mean, I certainly spent a lot more time scrolling on my phone. I think most people did. There was not much else to do. It was the way to communicate with the world. Yeah, I mean, and I think that there's a huge issue in sort of mental health confrontations, you know, with those things. What about EU regulation? We've seen Mark Zuckerberg turn up in the European Parliament a few times, you know, criticized for some of the stuff he's doing on privacy. We've seen some, you know, some quite stringent. I mean, GDPR did a lot of, you know, work on all platforms, etc. How strong is EU regulation in supporting citizens in their online voyage?
I think we need to take this issue a lot more seriously. And I'm pretty pleased we're doing this. We do have a special committee right now, which is looking at the problem of disinformation. We have a number of proposals, legislative and also political initiatives in the pipeline, which kind of look at the European space. I think this is important. which should also set rules for the big giants in the social media market. I don't blame some of those people you've mentioned in your surroundings who've checked out, because there is a lot of bullying, there is a lot of hate, there is a lot of harassment which has moved to the online space. A lot of it is not visible. Much of the freedom which we've gained in terms of the speed of exchange and information has not been accompanied by the safeguards. And I think it's about getting the balance right. So I think we need more safeguards to make sure that everybody feels comfortable in the online space. And we need to do more to protect, people's privacy, right to check out, but also the information everybody can gather. But especially, and this is where I'm most concerned, it's the safety and security. I think the principle that what's illegal offline should also apply to the online space. This is something we are pushing very much. Things like terrorist content, hate speech, this is where we already have some regulation at the level of the EU. But I am also very concerned about the harmful content. Disinformation, we've seen it through the pandemic, the COVID-19 situation, and all the disinformation hoaxes about COVID, the vaccines, and vaccination. I am very concerned, and this is where I think we need to place a lot more responsibility in the hands of the platforms.
So we've actually had a question from somebody viewing as a Tez. I don't know. It's a handle, so I don't know if I've got that perfectly right. And they're asking, in which situation and where are we about banning fake news on social media platforms? Do you think fake news should, people saying opinions that are sort of ostensibly false, factually, how should that be policed? How should that be worked with from your point of view, Vladimir?
Well, I think this is a question which touches the crux of the matter. And let me say that I am very much for free speech. I think freedom is an important value we have in politics, we have in European politics, and we should safeguard it. But with freedom comes also responsibility, and these two things go hand in hand. And quite frankly, I don't think we can or should ban fake news. This is not possible. And we kind of cannot catch the dog by the tail, whereby the dog is the spread of fake news. I don't think we can do this. What we can do, however, is to set certain rules and certain responsibilities, certain measures when it comes to transparency of the online space, where we seriously slow down the spread of fake news. This is the problem. A lot of the emotional, loaded stuff which you see and is full of hoaxes spreads very, very quickly.
That's the main problem.
Massively. It's the spread of massive manipulative disinformation, which is a problem. And I think this is where we can tackle it through meaningful regulation, which protects free speech on the one hand and freedom of opinion. If you don't like my haircut, that's fine. And feel free to say so. But at the same time, I think when there is a massive manipulation of people based on complete untruth, and we saw this, by the way, around the U.S. elections, when a lot of people in the U.S. believed that the result was fake, and it wasn't. And this is a problem, because that problem can become really heightened, emotional, and actually, as a result, and literally this is what happened in the US, people can die. And so this is what we're looking at the systemic ways in which the platforms take more responsibility and have a much greater responsibility when it comes to the spread and the intensity of the spread of the fake news.
Yeah, I interesting. Is in Slovakian the catching the dog by the tail? That's a phrase. In English we say wag. You can't wag the dog by the tail.
That's right. I Slovakized the English idiom. You can't wag the dog by the tail. You're absolutely right.
It's a lovely phrase. I've not thought of it in ages. So, I mean, when you talk about this as well, when you talk about the spread of fake news, I had a real issue with this myself, where I was accidentally a purveyor of fake news. I sent a tweet and missed a not. So I wrote, did do something, not did not do something. And this tweet, because it fitted a particular political narrative, absolutely exploded. And I was like, oh, it's a typo, you know, it's an accident. But it really shows it was you know, false information, and just went crazy. It was really difficult. And obviously
But
I
look, Jack,
deleted it incorrectly.
this is an excellent example. And I think we also need to get the terminology right here. What you did was basically misinformation, because you did not intend to do this. This was not intentional. And I think, you know, and that could happen to anybody. Of course, if it happens to a politician, that could be a real problem. If it happens to a journalist, it also is a real problem. But you can always correct yourself. You can state, okay, sorry, I made a mistake. It was a typo. You can delete it. The problem is when there is a person or a group of people who does this intentionally. To mislead the public, and then actually finds ways to boost the message and echo it across different target groups online. This is the problem. That's where the platforms need to have the responsibility, need to be able to detect this and slow down that message. So it's not about erasing the content. The harmful content, because, you know, I don't think we could do this in any organized way. It's about detecting it, it's about reporting it, and it's about making sure that it doesn't spread whereby it hurts the public. Because once the message becomes overwhelming, and we know this very well from politics, and once the message, which is overwhelming, is also extremely emotional, it's hard to counter it with anything. Facts, truth, science will not help you at that point. And this is where we need to inject more responsibility in the hands of the policymakers, and of course the social platforms as well.
There's a question from one of our viewers, Raymond, who's asking about this. How can we win against, it sort of follows on from what you're saying, how can we win against disinformation originated in China and Russia?
Look, I come from a country which used to be part of the Eastern Bloc until I was about 14. I grew up listening to the message with the Soviet Union forever, and that, of course, unfortunately did not turn out to be the ultimate truth, and I'm grateful for that. So, in other words, propaganda, disinformation has always been here. The problem is that now the online space has become a dominant tool for spreading it, and it's a lot easier for the adversaries, for the rivals, for the Chinese, the Russians, but also others to get that message across, also across Europe much faster, and kind of ingrain this sense of uncertainty, doubt, and really divide the people on our continent. And this is what I find problematic. How can we fight against that? I think it's a combination of things. We need to be a lot more vigilant and be able to detect these campaigns a lot more quickly. We need more resources and also more concentrated efforts at the level of the EU and the member states. I think we need to do a lot more. And by the way, I invite you to watch next week's plenary session in Strasbourg. We will be asking an oral question along these lines to Mr. Borrell, the High Representative. This is part of our work in the special committee, in the committee on disinformation. But we also need, in parallel, to put in more regulation, put in more rules, put in more safeguards when it comes to the social platforms. Because once that message from China, Russia, and other places gets inside the European space, it kind of picks up life on its own. We also have a lot of interlocutors here who are happy to spread that message, political, but also others. And so it's a combination of really detecting and preventing the message from the outside. And once it's within the bounds of the EU, I think we need to have the social platforms which take great responsibility for slowing down the spread of this message.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, it's really complicated, isn't it? So Thompson 1717 asks, do you think it's reasonable to get information from social media? So I suppose what he's probably asking there is news. Should we be picking our information from news? How should we perhaps filter that as a society, or, you know, to make sure that it's facts and information?
I am a very traditional person, actually. I still buy printed newspapers, and I love reading them.
Me too.
I still buy printed books, and I love reading real books. this is something which I'll always cherish. But I understand things have changed. And one of the things we are very much confronted with across Europe is that free, independent, strong, also public media have been under increasing pressure. And this is also in part a result of the spread of these online social platforms. And of course, the media world is adjusting. But I think this is again where we need to inject a bit more responsibility, or I should say a lot more responsibility when it comes to the platforms. I think the social platforms can be an excellent source of news and media. And I think they should, however, make sure that they really prioritize the verified quality news sources in their portfolio. When it comes to the curation of the content, which we all receive when we open Facebook or other platforms, we really should be exposed to the quality media rather than to the hoaxes and disinformation. And this is again where I think we need to push the platforms a lot more with regulation, which I think we can do and we should do at the level of the EU. And this is a particular problem, by the way, in smaller markets and smaller countries such as mine, Slovakia, but also others. This is where we need the European rules and European regulation to make sure that the quality content is also available in different languages and across the different countries, because after all, we are one single market. And the social platform should have a single set of rules also for this spread of news. So to make the story short, I think the social platforms can be an excellent vehicle for spreading the news and the quality media. But they, of course, need to have the rules and the incentives to do so. And we need to make them do so in the public interest of all of us.
Totally right. And I think one of the big changes, I think, in social media was when translate functions came on. And it meant that you could translate a tweet, translate a thing, and it's just meant that you can really read what everyone else. And so that sort of disinformation can change pretty quickly. So what will our kids think of social media in 10 to 15 years, says Raymond's another question from him. What do you think? We'll start wrapping up in a bit, and that's a good question to do it on. What is the future?
Well, look, I mean, we both come from the worlds of the reality where we had no social media, so we knew how it used to be, and now we are confronted with it, and we are learning, and some of us have to be fast learners. And I still cherish the old days when we didn't have it. But I recognize the reality, and I think the kids in 10, 15 years time, they will not understand how we could ever live without them. And I think this is all the more challenging and important in terms of making the online space as free, as safe, as secure, as healthy as the offline space. I think this is where we have a huge sense of responsibility in terms of the digital transformation, which has really changed so much of our lives in terms of business, in terms of politics, in terms of communication, in terms of the information which we get. But we just have to now think of the different safeguards to make it really something which can be user-friendly for everybody, and also for the kids, by the way. The kids are there, but the kids could really be a target of all sorts of attacks, harassment, bullying, and this is where I think we need to inject some balance into that space. And I hope that they understand in 10 to 15 years' time that we as policymakers have done a good job.
It's going to be fascinating, isn't it? Because it evolves so much. I mean, the things that we're doing on our platforms now were unimaginable 10 years ago, and the amount of spread of information. Listen, I think we've covered a whole load of that, a whole load here. I really appreciate you joining us this evening, Vladimir, for this conversation. Thanks to everybody for the questions as well. It is a chat about social media, so we can only encourage you to follow Vladimir Bilcik, to follow me, Jack E. Paruk is my handle, to follow the EPP group. You probably are if you're watching this, but also feel free to share this IGTV video onto your stories, etc., in the name of social media. And have a good day tomorrow for Social Media Day. I really appreciate your time, Vladimir. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Jack, and I hope we manage to have a good social media day every day, not just on 30th of June. And thanks for this, and have a nice evening.
Couldn't agree more. Have a lovely evening. Take it steady.